They didn't know she existed. They didn't know Cynthia had someone willing to fight for her. They didn't know the woman they were destroying was no longer the one they betrayed. Some empires are built on trust, but trust only works until the wrong woman walks through the door. Cynthia Brown suffered in silence. The stolen ideas, the forged documents, the crushing plan to erase her completely from her own company. No one stood for her. No one saw her fading until she made one desperate call. Her twin sister arrived quietly, saw the damage, and stepped into Cynthia's world wearing her name. They didn't know she existed. They didn't know Cynthia had someone willing to fight for her. They didn't know the woman they were destroying was no longer the one they betrayed. Some empires are built on trust, but trust only works until the wrong woman walks through the door. Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together, we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. Cynthia didn't see the betrayal coming. Trevor never gave warnings. One second, she was presenting their quarterly numbers to the board, explaining why their Jacksonville-based marketing firm was finally breaking even after 3 brutal years. And the next, his voice cut through the conference room like ice. Actually, Cynthia's numbers are outdated, he said smoothly, clicking on a different presentation. I've prepared the real projections. The sound of her own data, her research, her client relationships, her strategies, being presented as his, felt louder than it should have, sharp enough to make her ears ring. She staggered back mentally, gripping her leather portfolio to stay composed. Her eyes burned, but she kept them forward, knowing any reaction would only make it worse in front of these investors. The conference room lights cast a cold shine across his expression, one of confidence instead of partnership. He looked at her shocked the same way he'd look at a minor inconvenience, something someone else needed to handle. Patricia, his business attorney and longtime friend, sat at the far end of the table, watching like she was reviewing a performance she'd already scored. Strategic pivots are important, she said, her voice smooth and satisfied. The market rewards adaptability. Cynthia swallowed hard. Her throat felt tight, like her voice had been pushed into a corner of her chest and locked there. She nodded, even though she didn't agree. Didn't understand how any of this became acceptable. You see, Trevor said to the lead investor, an older gentleman named Richard Pemberton. This is what happens when vision gets diluted by sentiment. Behind. Patricia, 2 junior associates lingered near the door. They weren't supposed to be listening to this intently, but they were. And instead of looking away, they watched openly. One of them gave a small, uncomfortable shift when Cynthia's hands trembled as Trevor advanced to the next slide, her next slide, with her analysis, now credited to him. She hated that trembling. She hated how automatic it had become. Trevor brushed past her on his way to shake hands with Richard. We can discuss the partnership restructuring over dinner. Cynthia won't need to join us. Won't need to. Like she was optional in her own company. Cynthia waited until they were gone. Trevor, Patricia, the investors, the witnesses to her humiliation, before pressing a hand against her chest. The ache pulsed deep, but she breathed through it. She'd gotten good at that, holding her breath long enough for the pain to pass, pretending she didn't notice the echoes of his words on her reputation. When she finally walked back to her office, Patricia's eyes swept over her face, catching the barely contained devastation. But she only said, "You should consider your position carefully, Cynthia. Fighting this won't benefit anyone." So, Cynthia kept quiet. She returned to her desk, opened her laptop, and discovered that her access to the company's financial system had been restricted. Her email signature had been changed to Associate Consultant instead of Co-founder and Chief Strategy Officer. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The Brown family dining room had once been Cynthia's favorite place in Jacksonville. Her parents had hosted Sunday dinners there for 30 years, the kind where aunties brought sweet potato pie and uncles argued about the Jaguars. The walls held photos of Cynthia and her twin sister, Candace, at every age. Gap-toothed first graders, prom queens in matching lavender, college graduation with identical business degrees from Florida A&M. But tonight, the room felt like a courtroom. "Baby, you need to be realistic," her mother said, pushing a bowl of collard greens toward her untouched plate. "Trevor's family has connections all over Florida. You can't fight people like that." Cynthia stared at the greens, her appetite gone. "Mama, he's stealing from my company, the one I built from nothing. The clients are mine. The strategies are mine. Everything was 50-50 until 6 months ago when he started—" "Started what?" her father interrupted, his voice heavy with something between exhaustion and warning. "Started being smart about business? Cynthia, you're a brilliant strategist, but you've always been too trusting. You should have protected yourself legally from the beginning." "I did protect myself," she said, her voice cracking despite her effort to stay composed. "We had partnership agreements, 50-50 ownership, equal decision-making authority, but he's been moving assets, restructuring the corporate entity, filing amendments I never signed. Patricia's been helping him do it." Her father exchanged a look with her mother. That look, the one that said they'd already discussed this and decided on their position. "Sweetheart," her mother said carefully, "the Whitfields have been very generous to this family. When your father's business nearly went under in '08, Trevor's father extended that loan, without interest. We can't—" "You can't say what?" Cynthia's voice rose. "You can't support your own daughter because you owe his family money?" Silence crashed into the room. Her father set down his fork with deliberate control. "That loan saved our house, Cynthia, saved your college fund, saved everything we'd worked for. So yes, we're grateful to the Whitfields. And yes, that means we can't take sides in whatever business disagreement you're having with Trevor." Business disagreement. As if systematic theft of intellectual property and corporate identity could be reduced to a disagreement. Her mother reached across the table, voice soft, but firm. "Maybe you should consider what Patricia suggested. Take the associate position, collect a steady salary, and start something new on the side. You're only 34. You have time to rebuild." "Start over?" Cynthia whispered. "After I spent 3 years building Brown and Whitfield strategic, after I brought in 90% of our clients, after I developed every single methodology we use?" Her father's jaw tightened. "Then why is Trevor's name on all the patents?" The question hung in the air like poison gas. "Because I trusted him," Cynthia wanted to scream. "Because we were partners. Because I focused on building something real while he focused on building legal walls around it." Instead, she said nothing. She couldn't find the words. Her mother continued, desperation creeping into her voice. "The Whitfields are powerful, baby. Old Florida money, country club connections. If you fight Trevor publicly, they'll destroy your reputation. Make sure you never work in marketing. Again. Is your pride worth that?" Pride. They thought this was about pride. Cynthia stood slowly, her legs unsteady. "I need some air." She walked out onto her parents' back porch, the humid Jacksonville night pressing against her skin. Spanish moss hung from the live oak in the yard, swaying gently in the breeze. She could hear the distant sound of I-95, the constant reminder that life kept moving whether you were drowning or not. Her phone buzzed. A text from Trevor. "Board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Need you to sign the restructuring documents. Patricia will walk you through everything. This is best for everyone. Best for everyone. Translation, best for him." Cynthia's hands curled around the porch railing. The wood was warm from the day's sun, solid, real. She needed something solid because everything else in her life was dissolving. She thought about the early days with Trevor. They met at a marketing conference in Miami, both young and ambitious, both convinced they could build something different. He'd had the capital and connections. She'd had the vision and hustle. 50-50, they'd said, true partners. For the first 2 years, it had worked. They'd landed major clients, a regional hospital system, 3 automotive dealerships, a growing tech startup in Tampa. Cynthia had developed their signature methodology, emotional resonance marketing that targeted middle-market businesses tired of generic strategies. It worked. It worked brilliantly. But somewhere around year 3, Trevor changed. Or maybe he'd always been this way, and she'd been too naive to see it. He started having meetings without her and making decisions unilaterally, introducing clients to his team without mentioning her role. And Patricia, his attorney, started showing up more frequently, always with documents that needed quick signatures for routine corporate maintenance. Cynthia had signed them all, because partners trust each other, until the day she discovered her ownership stake had been diluted to 30% through a series of capital restructurings she'd never understood, until she found out Trevor had filed for patents on her methodologies under his name alone, until she realized the company she'd built was no longer hers. Her phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from Patricia. "Cynthia, the restructuring is happening with or without your signature. Tomorrow's meeting is a courtesy. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Courtesy. They were destroying her professionally and calling it courtesy. Cynthia looked up at the oak tree, at the Spanish moss moving in the wind, and made a decision. She scrolled through her contacts until she found a number she hadn't called in 2 years. Her thumb hovered over it for a long moment, shame and fear warring with desperation. Then she pressed call. It rang once, twice, 3 times. She almost hung up. Then a voice answered, crisp and alert despite the late hour. "Cynthia?" "Candace," Cynthia breathed, her voice breaking. "I need you." She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. Her twin sister, her mirror image, her complete opposite in temperament and tactics, said without hesitation, "I'm on the next flight. Don't sign anything. Don't agree with anything. I'll be there by morning." And just like that, everything changed. Because Trevor and Patricia and the Whitfield family and the investors didn't know something crucial about Cynthia Brown. They didn't know she had an identical twin sister who'd spent the last 8 years as a corporate litigator in New York, specializing in partnership disputes and intellectual property theft. They didn't know Candace Brown had made a career of destroying men who underestimated women. They didn't know the woman they were betraying had backup they couldn't see coming. And they definitely didn't know that by tomorrow morning, the power dynamic in Jacksonville's marketing world was about to shift in ways they couldn't imagine. Candace Brown arrived at Jacksonville International Airport at 6:30 a.m., carrying only a small leather duffel and an expression that could cut glass. Cynthia waited for her arrival, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup she hadn't been able to drink, her stomach too twisted with anxiety and exhaustion. She hadn't slept. She'd spent the entire night reading and rereading every document she could find related to Brown and Whitfield's strategic, trying to understand how Trevor had legally dismantled her ownership while she'd been focused on actually running the business. When Candace stepped through the automatic doors, Cynthia felt something shift in her chest. They were identical in every physical way, same deep brown skin, same full lips, same precisely arched eyebrows. Their grandmother had taught them to shape at 15. But when Cynthia carried herself with warmth and openness, Candace moved like a weapon being transported to a battlefield. Sharp, contained, dangerous. "Don't cry," Candace said immediately, pulling Cynthia into a brief, fierce hug. "We don't have time for tears. We have 8 hours before your board meeting, and we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." Cynthia nodded, swallowing hard. "I brought copies of everything." "Not here." Candace's eyes scanned the airport with professional paranoia. Is there somewhere private we can work? Not your apartment, not your parents' house. Somewhere Trevor wouldn't think to look. There's a small business incubator space in Riverside. I mentored some startups there last year. We can use one of the conference rooms. Perfect. Let's go. 20 minutes later, they were spread out in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the St. Johns River. Morning light glinted off the water as Candace methodically organized documents into piles, her mind clearly processing information at a speed that would terrify most people. "Talk," she said, without looking up. "Start from the beginning. When did you first notice something was wrong?" Cynthia took a shaky breath. "About 6 months ago. Trevor started having private meetings with Patricia about corporate restructuring. He said it was routine maintenance, making sure we were optimized for growth. I was busy landing the Riverside Regional Health contract, so I didn't question it." "Did you read the documents you signed?" Shame heated Cynthia's face. "Not carefully enough. Patricia would bring them during board meetings, explain them quickly in legal language I didn't fully understand, and say they needed to be filed immediately. I trusted her. I trusted him." "Never trust a white man's attorney," Candace said flatly. "That's rule 1. What happened next?" "I started noticing my name disappearing from things. Client presentations, marketing materials, the website. When I asked Trevor about it, he said we were repositioning the brand to focus on his personal leadership story because it resonated better with high-net-worth clients." Candace's jaw tightened, but she kept reading. "And the clients? Who brought them in?" "I brought in over 90% of them. Trevor handles investor relations and finance, but client development and strategy, that's all me. It was all me." "Is all you," Candace corrected sharply. "Present tense. We're not conceding anything yet." She pulled out a document with highlighted sections. "This capital restructuring from 3 months ago. Did you understand what you were signing?" Cynthia's voice went small. "Trevor said we needed additional investment to expand to Miami and Atlanta, that it would dilute our ownership percentages temporarily, but would be worth it for the growth potential. Except the growth never happened, and your ownership dropped from 50% to 30%, while his stayed at 55%. How is that even legal?" Candace smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "It's legal because you gave him authorization to issue new shares without your approval. See this clause here? Managing partner retains sole discretion over capital structure decisions necessary for operational efficiency. You signed away your protection." Cynthia felt sick. "I didn't understand." "I know. That's what men like Trevor count on. Smart women who are good at their actual jobs but don't speak fluent corporate law." Candace set down the document and looked directly at her sister. "Here's what he's done. Systematically transferred your intellectual property into corporate assets he controls, diluted your ownership to minority status, positioned himself as the face of the company while erasing your contributions. Classic corporate theft, executed with just enough legal cover to make fighting it expensive and time-consuming." "So, I've already lost." "No." Candace's voice was steel. "You've lost if you give up. But we're not giving up. We're going to war." "I can't afford a war. Trevor has the Whitfield family resources." "I have." "You have me," Candace interrupted. "And you're about to have something else." She pulled a business card from her wallet and slid it across the table. "This is Jerome Washington. He runs the best forensic accounting firm in the Southeast. He owes me a favor from a case I handled in New York. He's going to audit Brown and Whitfield Strategic, and I guarantee we're going to find financial irregularities. You can't audit a company without authorization. You're still a minority shareholder. You have legal rights to financial transparency. Patricia will fight it, but she'll lose. And once Jerome gets into those books, we're going to find exactly how Trevor's been moving money around." Cynthia felt a flicker of something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. "But even if we find irregularities, the board meeting is in 3 hours. They're going to force me to sign." "You're not going to the board meeting." "What?" Candace leaned back, her expression shifting into something that would have looked like Cynthia's face, but with an edge of calculation Cynthia never wore. "I'm going to the board meeting." Understanding crashed over Cynthia like cold water. "No, Candace, no, that's fraud. That's strategic deception," Candace corrected. "And it's not fraud if I'm acting on your behalf with your explicit permission. I'm not signing anything. I'm not agreeing to anything. I'm simply going to observe, ask questions, and gather information about what Trevor's really planning. They'll know you're not me. Patricia's known me for 3 years. Patricia's known a version of you that's accommodating, uncertain, and intimidated. She's never seen you confident, legally informed, and ready to fight. Trust me, people see what they expect to see. And right now, they expect you to show up defeated and ready to sign whatever they put in front of you. Instead, they're going to get me, and I'm going to make them very, very nervous. This is insane. This is war." Candace stood, smoothing her blazer. It was slate gray, perfectly tailored, the uniform of corporate combat. "Now, tell me everything I need to know about Trevor's patterns. How does he talk? What makes him comfortable? What makes him defensive?" For the next 2 hours, Cynthia briefed her twin on 3 years of partnership dynamics. Trevor's tells when he was lying. He touched his left cufflink. His power moves in meetings. He always stood near the window to control the lighting. Patricia's tactics. She used complex legal language to confuse and intimidate. The board members' dynamics. Richard Pemberton was the key vote, a former marketing executive who respected strategic thinking. "What about Trevor's personal life?" Candace asked. "Anything I need to know?" Cynthia hesitated, then said quietly, "He's engaged to someone named Ashley Thornton. They're getting married at the country club in 3 months." Candace's eyebrow arched. "Interesting. When did this happen?" "He announced it 6 months ago, right when the corporate restructuring started. So right when he was stealing from your company, he was also planning his society wedding. This man's confidence is truly something." Candace shook her head. "Does Ashley work with the company?" "No, she's a real estate agent. Old Jacksonville family, lots of connections." "Of course she is." Candace checked her watch. "All right, it's 8:30. The meeting starts in 30 minutes. Time for me to become Cynthia Brown, defeated entrepreneur about to sign her life away." "I hate this," Cynthia whispered. Candace gripped her sister's shoulders, forcing eye contact. "Listen to me. What Trevor did to you is wrong. It's unethical. It's cruel, and it might be illegal. But you didn't lose because you're weak or stupid. You lost because you're a good person who trusted your partner while he was planning to betray you. That's not a character flaw. That's called being human." Tears burned in Cynthia's eyes. "But now," Candace continued, her voice hardening, "we're going to teach him what happens when you underestimate a brown woman. Both of us. Because I'm not doing this alone. While I'm at the meeting, you're going to meet with Jerome Washington. You're going to give him every document, every password, every piece of access you still have. And then we're going to burn Trevor's house of cards to the ground." Cynthia nodded, trying to absorb her sister's certainty. "One more thing," Candace said, her expression softening just slightly. "When this is over, and we will win, Cynthia, I promise you that, you're going to rebuild, stronger, smarter, without any Trevor Whitfield dragging you down. You're going to create something that's entirely yours, that no one can take from you. Understood?" "Understood." "Good. Now fix my collar. I need to look exactly like you walking in there." They stood in front of the conference room window, identical reflections staring back. Candace adjusted her posture, softening her shoulders, lowering her chin slightly. The transformation was subtle, but complete. The corporate warrior disappeared, replaced by someone who looked exactly like Cynthia on her worst day, uncertain, intimidated, defeated. "How do I look?" Candace asked. "Like me," Cynthia admitted. "Exactly like me. Perfect. Then let's go make Trevor Whitfield's life very complicated. The Brown and Whitfield Strategic Partners Conference Room occupied the corner suite of a renovated historic building in Jacksonville's downtown district. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the river, and the decor screamed expensive minimalism. White marble table, leather chairs, abstract art that probably cost more than most people's cars. Trevor Whitfield stood near the window, exactly as Cynthia had predicted, reviewing notes on his tablet. He wore a navy suit that fitted him perfectly, his sandy hair styled with the casual precision of someone who spent time and money on looking effortlessly handsome. At 36, he had the bearing of someone who'd never seriously questioned his place in the world's hierarchy. Patricia Morrison sat at the far end of the table. Documents spread before her in ominous, neat piles. She was 52, her silver hair cut in a severe bob, her black suit making her look like a prosecuting attorney, which, in a sense, she was. 3 board members occupied the middle seats: Richard Pemberton, the lead investor, Margaret Chen, a local business consultant, and David Foster, Trevor's college roommate who'd invested early. When Candace walked through the door at exactly 9 o'clock, carrying Cynthia's worn leather portfolio, the room went quiet. "Good morning," she said, her voice pitched slightly higher than her natural register, her shoulders rounded just enough to signal uncertainty. Trevor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Cynthia, glad you could make it. Please sit." Candace sat in the chair Cynthia would have chosen, not at the head of the table, not in the power position, but in the middle, where she could be surrounded and contained. Every detail mattered in making them believe she was Cynthia at her weakest. "Let's get started," Patricia said briskly. "We have several documents to review and sign this morning. As we've discussed, the company restructuring is essential for our continued growth and investor confidence." Candace nodded slowly, her fingers nervously drumming on the portfolio gesture she'd seen Cynthia make 100 times. "I understand. I want to make sure I understand exactly what I'm signing." A flicker of impatience crossed Patricia's face. "We've gone over this multiple times, Cynthia. The restructuring protects everyone's interests." "I know. Candace let her voice trail off, letting the uncertainty hang in the air. "Could you walk me through it one more time? I want to make sure I'm clear." Trevor leaned forward, his voice taking on a patronizing gentleness. "Cynthia, we don't have all day. The investors need these documents filed by the end of business today. You're holding up everyone." "I understand the timeline," Candace said softly. "But this is my life's work. Surely 10 minutes of clarity isn't too much to ask." Richard Pemberton shifted in his seat. "I think that's reasonable, Trevor. Let's walk through the key points." Score 1, Candace thought. Richard was the key vote, and he'd just established that he valued thoroughness over Trevor's impatience. Patricia sighed and pulled forward the first document. "This is the amended operating agreement. It formalizes the capital restructuring we completed last quarter and establishes Trevor as managing partner with operational authority." "Managing partner," Candace repeated, "but we started as equal partners, 50-50. "Market conditions change," Trevor said smoothly. "We've discussed this. My family connections and capital have been essential for our growth. This structure reflects that reality." Candace let silence sit for 3 beats, long enough to be uncomfortable. Then, "What about my client relationships? I brought in over 90% of our revenue." "You've been an excellent business development executive," Patricia said, her tone suggesting this was a generous compliment. "And the new structure ensures you're fairly compensated for that role." "Business development executive," Candace said slowly, as if tasting the words. "Not co-founder, not chief strategy officer." "Titles are just semantics," Trevor said, his patience thinning. "What matters is that you're taken care of." "Take care of," Candace echoed. She looked up, meeting Trevor's eyes directly, the first time Cynthia had done so in months, based on what her sister had described. Like an employee, not a partner. The room temperature dropped several degrees. Margaret Chen cleared her throat. I think what Trevor means. I know what Trevor means, Candace interrupted gently. I just want to be clear about what I'm agreeing to, because based on these documents, I'm signing away my ownership stake in exchange for a 3-year employment contract at a fixed salary with no equity participation in future growth. Patricia's eyes narrowed. That's an oversimplification. Is it? Candace pulled out a sheet of notes, something Cynthia would never have done, but the move was subtle enough to play as unusual preparation rather than out of character. Because I consulted with an attorney friend, and that's exactly how she described it. Trevor's hand moved to his left cufflink. Cynthia had been right. That was his tell. You spoke to an attorney? Patricia's voice was sharp. I mentioned it to a friend from college, Candace said, maintaining the uncertain tone. Just to make sure I understood. She raised some concerns. What kind of concerns? Richard leaned forward, suddenly very interested. Candace opened her portfolio and pulled out a single sheet of papers, something Jerome Washington had provided that morning, a preliminary analysis. She slid it across the table. She was concerned about this capital restructuring from 3 months ago, the one that diluted my ownership from 50% to 30%. She said the terms seemed unusual for a company with our revenue profile. Patricia's face remained neutral, but Candace saw her fingers tighten on her pen. Richard picked up the paper, scanning it. His expression shifted. These terms are unusual. Trevor, why would we issue new shares at such a deep discount? That substantially undervalues the company. It was necessary for the expansion strategy, Trevor said quickly. Patricia can explain the tax advantages. I'd like to hear about these tax advantages, Margaret said, because this looks more like an ownership transfer than a capital raise. The meeting was unraveling. Candace could see Trevor's confidence fracturing, Patricia scrambling to regain control. Perhaps we should table this discussion, Patricia said firmly. Clearly, Cynthia needs more time to review. Actually, Candace interrupted again, her voice still soft but her words precise. I don't need more time. I need transparency. Specifically, I need a complete financial audit before I sign anything else. Silence crashed into the room. That's not necessary, Trevor said, his charm evaporating. We have standard accounting practices. As a minority shareholder, I have the legal right to request an audit, Candace continued. I'm not refusing to sign. I'm just asking for basic financial transparency before making a permanent decision about my future with this company. Richard set down the paper and looked at Trevor with an expression that had shifted from supportive to skeptical. She's right. If there's nothing to hide, an audit should be straightforward. There's nothing to hide, Patricia said quickly, but audits are expensive and time-consuming. I'll cover the cost, Candace said. I've already contracted with a forensic accounting firm. They can start next week if we provide access to the financial systems. Trevor's face had gone red. Forensic accounting? Cynthia. What the hell is this? You come in here throwing around accusations. I haven't accused anyone of anything, Candace said calmly. I've simply asked for transparency before signing away my ownership in the company I built. The company we built, Trevor snapped. Then the audit should confirm that, shouldn't it? David Foster, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. I think Cynthia's being reasonable. If I were in her position, I'd want the same information. Margaret nodded. I agree. This has been rushed. We should postpone the signing until after an independent audit. Richard. Patricia's voice was tight. Richard looked at the document again, then at Trevor, then at Candace. I think we need to slow down. Something doesn't feel right about this restructuring. If the audit shows everything is legitimate, we'll proceed. But until then, I'm voting to table this discussion. Trevor stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble. This is ridiculous. Cynthia, you're being paranoid and ungrateful. My family has supported you. Your family gave my parents a loan, Candace said quietly. That doesn't entitle you to steal from my company. The word hung in the air like a grenade. Careful, Patricia said coldly. That's dangerously close to slander. It's only slander if it's false, Candace replied. The audit will tell us which it is. Trevor grabbed his tablet and headed for the door. This meeting is over. We'll reconvene when Cynthia stops listening to whatever amateur attorney is filling her head with conspiracy theories. He slammed the door behind him. Patricia gathered her documents with controlled fury, following without another word. When they were gone, Richard turned to Candace with something like respect. That took courage. It took desperation, Candace said honestly, or at least as honestly as she could while pretending to be her sister. But thank you for supporting the audit. I should have asked harder questions months ago, Richard admitted. The capital restructuring never made sense to me, but Trevor was persuasive about the growth strategy. If your audit finds irregularities, I'll support whatever actions you need to take, Margaret added. Me too. I've always felt you were undervalued in this partnership, Cynthia. Maybe it's time that changed. After they left, Candace sat alone in the conference room, her heart pounding from adrenaline. She'd bought them time. More importantly, she'd planted doubt in the board members' minds about Trevor's integrity. Her phone buzzed with a text from Cynthia. How did it go? Candace smiled and typed back, Phase 1 complete. They have no idea what's coming. 3 weeks later, Jerome Washington's forensic audit revealed what Candace had suspected: systematic financial manipulation designed to enrich Trevor while diminishing Cynthia's value to the company. The irregularities were extensive: client payments routed through personal accounts, company expenses for Trevor's country club membership and Ashley's engagement ring, intellectual property transfers that violated partnership agreements, and most damning, evidence that Trevor had been negotiating to sell Brown & Whitfield Strategic to a larger firm for $8 million, a sale that would have given Cynthia just 30% of proceeds from the company she'd built. When Richard Pemberton reviewed the audit report in his downtown office, his face went from skeptical to angry to coldly furious in the span of 10 minutes. This is fraud, he said flatly. Criminal fraud. Cynthia, the real Cynthia, now operating openly with Candace at her side, nodded. We have 3 options: file criminal charges, sue civilly for damages, or negotiate a settlement that returns my ownership stake and removes Trevor from the company. Why would you negotiate? Richard asked. He deserves to be prosecuted, Candace answered, her voice carrying the weight of experience. Because prosecution takes years, costs hundreds of thousands in legal fees, and might still fail if Trevor's family brings their resources to bear. A negotiated settlement can happen in days, gets Cynthia, her company, back, and sends Trevor away with his reputation destroyed, which is the real punishment for someone like him. Richard considered this. What kind of settlement are you proposing? Trevor signs over his ownership stake to Cynthia for $1, Candace said. He resigns from all positions with the company, effective immediately. He signs a comprehensive non-compete agreement that prevents him from working in strategic marketing in Florida for 5 years. And in exchange, we don't file criminal charges or civil suits. That's generous, Richard said. More generous than he deserves. It's practical, Cynthia said quietly. I don't want revenge. I want my company back. I want to move forward without years of litigation hanging over me. Richard nodded slowly. I'll speak to the other board members. If they agree, we'll present this to Trevor and Patricia tomorrow. But Cynthia, he looked at her with genuine respect. I owe you an apology. I should have seen what was happening earlier. I let myself be charmed by Trevor's confidence instead of doing my due diligence. You're doing it now, Cynthia said. That's what matters. The next day, in a very different conference room meeting, Trevor and Patricia faced the complete board armed with Jerome's audit, Candace's legal analysis, and the unified support of every board member except David Foster, who'd quietly resigned his seat rather than choose between his college friend and basic ethics. Patricia tried to argue that the audit was biased, that the financial arrangements were normal, and that this was all a misunderstanding. But numbers don't lie, and Jerome's documentation was irrefutable. Trevor, for his part, seemed to age 10 years over the course of the 2-hour meeting. His charm evaporated. His confidence crumbled. His last desperate card, threatening to call in the loan his family had made to Cynthia's parents, was countered by Candace, producing evidence that the loan had been repaid in full 2 years ago, something Trevor's father had apparently never told him. "So," Richard said when the evidence presentation was complete, "you have 2 options, Trevor. Accept the settlement agreement and walk away quietly, or we file both criminal and civil charges and let the courts determine your fate. You have 24 hours to decide." Trevor looked at Cynthia with something between hatred and disbelief. "You did this." "No," Cynthia said calmly. "You did this. I just stopped letting you get away with it." He signed the settlement agreement that afternoon. Within a week, all corporate documents had been amended. Brown and Whitfield Strategic became simply Brown Strategic. Trevor Whitfield's name disappeared from the website, the marketing materials, the client communications, just as Cynthia's had been disappearing months earlier. Justice, Candace reflected, sometimes looks like poetic reversal. 6 months after Trevor's departure, Brown Strategic was thriving in ways that surprised even Cynthia. She'd rebranded the firm completely, focusing on her true strength, helping small and medium-sized businesses develop authentic marketing strategies that didn't rely on manipulation or empty promises. Her tagline, "Strategy with Integrity," resonated with exactly the kind of clients she wanted. Ethical business owners tired of agencies that oversold and underdelivered. Revenue was up 30%, client retention was 95%, and Cynthia had hired 3 new strategists, all women, all brilliant, all given equity stakes from day one. "No more silent partners," she'd told Candace. "No more trusting structure over substance. Everyone who builds this with me owns a piece of it." Candace had returned to New York but visited monthly, and the sisters had grown closer than they'd been since college. Shared trauma, shared victory, it forged bonds that couldn't be broken. One Thursday afternoon, Cynthia was reviewing a proposal for a potential Orlando expansion when her assistant buzzed. "Someone here to see you. Says it's personal." "Who is it?" "Ashley Thornton." "Well, Ashley Whitfield now, I guess." Cynthia's stomach tightened. Trevor's wife. They'd gotten married 2 months ago, a much smaller ceremony than originally planned, at a venue significantly less prestigious than the country club. "Send her in." Ashley entered hesitantly. She was petite, blonde, impeccably dressed in that junior league way that screamed old Southern money. Her engagement ring caught the light, the one Trevor had charged to company expenses. "Thank you for seeing me," Ashley said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," Cynthia admitted. "What can I do for you?" Ashley sat down, her hands folded in her lap. "I want to apologize. I knew Trevor was pushing you out of the company. I knew it was wrong. But I convinced myself it was just business, that you'd be fine, that successful people land on their feet. I was selfish and cowardly, and I'm sorry." Cynthia studied her carefully. "Why are you telling me this now?" Ashley's laugh was bitter. "Because I'm living with the consequences of marrying someone who steals from his partners. Trevor's father cut him off after the settlement became public. His reputation in Jacksonville is destroyed. He's working as a marketing associate, not even a director, an associate, at a firm in Tampa. We had to sell our house. I'm working double shifts in real estate just to cover our mortgage on the condo we downgraded to." "I'm sorry," Cynthia said, and meant it. "That sounds difficult." "It's karma," Ashley said flatly. "I married a thief and a liar because he looked good and had family money. Now the money's gone, and I'm stuck with who he actually is, which is not a good person." Silence sat between them for a moment. I didn't come here looking for forgiveness, Ashley continued. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I see what Trevor did now. I see what I enabled. And I wanted you to know that you were right to fight him. You were right about all of it. Cynthia nodded slowly. Thank you for saying that. It doesn't change what happened, but it matters. Ashley stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. Trevor's been telling people you seduced your sister into helping you commit fraud against him, that the audit was fabricated, that you're the criminal. I've been correcting that story every time I hear it. It's the least I can do. After Ashley left, Cynthia sat at her desk feeling an unexpected sense of closure. Not satisfaction. She didn't take pleasure in Trevor's downfall, but validation. The truth was establishing itself in Jacksonville's business community. Her reputation was being rebuilt, stronger than before. Her phone rang. Candace. Hey, twin, I have news. Good news or bad news? Excellent news. Remember Patricia Morrison? Cynthia's grip tightened on the phone. Trevor's attorney? The one who helped him steal my company? The same. The Florida bar just opened an investigation into her conduct in your case. Turns out several other former clients have come forward with complaints about her facilitating partnership theft. Her license is under review. Good, Cynthia said quietly. She knew exactly what she was doing. Justice is slow, Candace said, but it's thorough. How are things on your end? Growing, thriving, better than I imagined 6 months ago. That's because you're running things now. No Trevor holding you back. Speaking of which, have you thought about my suggestion? Candace had been pushing Cynthia to write a book about her experience, not as a revenge memoir, but as a practical guide for entrepreneurs, especially women and people of color, on protecting themselves legally in business partnerships. I've been thinking about it, Cynthia admitted, maybe starting with some blog posts, building from there. Do it. Your story matters. Not because it's unique. Sadly, it's incredibly common for founders to get pushed out of their own companies by more legally savvy partners. But because you fought back and won, people need to see that's possible. After they hung up, Cynthia opened a blank document and started typing. How I Lost My Company and Got It Back, a guide for entrepreneurs who trust too much. The words flowed easier than she'd expected. 3 years of pain, betrayal, fear, and eventual triumph. It deserved to be documented, not to shame Trevor, though he'd certainly earned that, but to help the next Cynthia Brown who finds herself being systematically erased from her own creation. That evening, Cynthia met her parents for dinner at their favorite restaurant in Riverside. The conversation had been strained since the settlement, but time was slowly healing that relationship too. We're proud of you, baby, her father said gruffly. I know we didn't support you the way we should have. We let our debt to the Whitfields cloud our judgment. We were wrong, her mother added, and we're sorry. Cynthia reached across the table and squeezed their hands. You were scared. I understand that now. Fear makes people do things they wouldn't otherwise do. Still, her father insisted, you're our daughter. We should have stood by you from the beginning. You're standing by me now, Cynthia said simply. That's what matters. As she drove home that night, past the illuminated skyline of downtown Jacksonville, past the river reflecting city lights, past all the familiar landmarks of the city where she'd nearly lost everything and somehow rebuilt, Cynthia felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not the absence of struggle. Running a growing company was still challenging, exhausting, sometimes overwhelming, but peace in knowing she was doing it on her own terms, with people she trusted, building something that reflected her actual values. Trevor had tried to erase her. Instead, he'd erased himself. Karma, Ashley had called it. Maybe. Or maybe just the natural consequence of building on a foundation of betrayal. Either way, Cynthia had learned the hardest lesson of her professional life. Trust must be earned and verified, never simply granted because someone shares your vision or your conference room. 2 years after reclaiming her company, Cynthia stood on stage at a small business conference in Atlanta, addressing a crowd of entrepreneurs about partnership agreements and legal protection. "I'm going to tell you a story," she began, "about how I built $1 million company, lost it to my business partner, and eventually got it back. Not because I'm special or particularly savvy, but because I finally learned to ask the right questions and demand the right protections." The audience leaned forward, captivated. She told them about Trevor, about Patricia, about the systematic theft disguised as routine corporate maintenance. She told them about her parents' misplaced loyalty, about her own naive trust, about the dark nights when she genuinely believed she'd lost everything. And then she told them about Candace, about sisterhood showing up when no one else would, about forensic accounting revealing truth, about board members remembering their integrity, about fighting back not with emotion but with documentation. "Here's what I learned," she said, her voice carrying to the back of the conference hall. "In business, trust is beautiful, but verification is essential. Love your partners, believe in your vision, work with integrity, but always, always protect yourself legally. Because the people who want to steal from you are counting on your trust being stronger than your caution." She walked them through specific clauses to include in partnership agreements, red flags that indicate trouble, resources for entrepreneurs who suspect they're being squeezed out, the difference between tough negotiation and actual fraud. When she finished, the standing ovation lasted 2 full minutes. Afterward, at least 30 people approached her with their own stories of partnership betrayals, stolen ideas, corporate manipulation. Some were still fighting, some had given up. All of them needed to know they weren't alone. "You gave me hope," one woman said, tears in her eyes. "I thought I was the only one stupid enough to let this happen." "You're not stupid," Cynthia said firmly. "You're human. The people who betray that humanity, they're the ones who should be ashamed." That night, in her hotel room, Cynthia video called Candace. "The speech went well," she reported. "People really connected with the story." "Of course they did. It's real, it's raw, it's exactly what entrepreneurs need to hear." Candace grinned. "You're becoming quite the thought leader, sis." "I'm becoming a warning sign," Cynthia corrected. "A cautionary tale with a happy ending." "The best kind of tale. Hey, speaking of endings, Trevor's trying to start a consulting practice." Cynthia raised an eyebrow. "Really? What kind of consulting?" "Business strategy. He's calling himself a turnaround expert. Apparently, he's positioning his time at Brown and Whitfield as evidence of his strategic vision." "Of course he is." Cynthia shook her head. "Some people never learn." "Want me to send a cease and desist about his use of your company and his marketing?" "No," Cynthia decided. "Let him try. Anyone who does their due diligence will find the real story. And if they don't do their due diligence," she shrugged, "they'll learn the same lesson I did." "You're very zen about this." "I'm very done giving Trevor space in my head," Cynthia clarified. "He stole 2 years of my peace. He doesn't get any more." After they ended the call, Cynthia pulled out her journal, a practice she'd started during the darkest days of the legal battle. She wrote, "Today I help 30 people understand they're not alone in being betrayed by business partners. I gave them tools to protect themselves. I showed them that fighting back is possible. This is why it all happened. Not for me, for them. Every person who doesn't have to go through what I went through makes all of it worthwhile. Trevor took my company, but he gave me something more valuable, clarity about who I am and what I'm capable of. He tried to make me small. Instead, he showed me exactly how big I could be when I stopped asking permission to take up space. I don't forgive him. Maybe someday, but not today. Today, I'm just grateful I survived him." 5 years after reclaiming Brown Strategic, Cynthia stood in her new office, a beautifully renovated space in downtown Jacksonville's historic district, with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. Her team had grown to 12 full-time strategists. Her client list included major regional brands and ambitious startups. Her book, Strategy with Integrity: How to Build a Business That Can't Be Stolen, had become required reading in several MBA programs. But more importantly, she'd built a company culture that reflected everything she'd learned from nearly losing it all. Transparent financials are shared quarterly with all staff. Equity participation for every employee after year 1. Regular legal reviews of all partnership agreements and corporate documents. And a flat-out refusal to work with clients who wanted to cut ethical corners. "We're strategy consultants, not magicians," she'd told one potential client who wanted to manipulate their competition through deceptive marketing. "And we're definitely not con artists. If that's what you're looking for, we're not the right firm." That client had left disappointed. 3 others who heard about her stance had signed immediately, specifically because of her integrity. On this particular morning, Cynthia was reviewing proposals for a major expansion into Birmingham, Alabama, when her assistant knocked. "Visitor for you, no appointment, but she says you'll want to see her." Curiosity piqued. Cynthia looked up as a young woman entered, mid-20s, professional but nervous, carrying a portfolio that looked suspiciously like the one Cynthia had carried 5 years earlier. "Ms. Brown, thank you for seeing me. My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm a junior partner at Mitchell & Associates Marketing, and I think my senior partner is stealing my work." Cynthia's heart ached with recognition. "Sit down, Lauren. Tell me everything." Over the next hour, Lauren described a situation painfully similar to what Cynthia had experienced. A charismatic senior partner, subtle erasure of contributions, promised equity that kept getting delayed, and financial documents that didn't quite make sense. "I don't know what to do," Lauren admitted. "I can't afford a lawyer. My family thinks I'm being paranoid, and I'm scared that if I push back, I'll lose everything I've worked for." Cynthia pulled out a business card and slid it across her desk. "This is my sister, Candace Brown. She's a corporate attorney in New York who specializes in exactly this kind of case. Tell her I sent you. She'll review your documents for free and tell you if you have grounds to fight." Lauren's eyes filled with tears. "I can't possibly afford—" "She'll work on contingency if there's a real case. And if there isn't, she'll tell you that too. She'll be honest." Cynthia leaned forward. "Lauren, I've been exactly where you are. I know how scary it is, but I also know that staying silent doesn't make it better. It only makes them bolder. What if I fight and lose?" "What if you fight and win?" Cynthia countered. "What if 5 years from now you're sitting in your own office helping the next young woman who's being erased by her partner? What if your worst moment becomes the foundation of your greatest success?" Lauren wiped her eyes. "That's what happened to you, isn't it?" "Yes, and I wouldn't change it now. Not the betrayal, not the fear, not even the pain. Because all of it made me the businesswoman I am today. All of it taught me lessons I needed to learn." Cynthia smiled. "I just wish I'd learned them at a lower cost." "Thank you," Lauren said, quietly, "for believing me, for not making me feel crazy or paranoid." "You're not crazy. You're being stolen from. There's a difference." Cynthia walked her to the door. "Call Candace today. Don't wait. And then, regardless of what she tells you, start documenting everything. Every contribution you make, every idea you generate, every client you bring in. Paper trail beats good intentions every time." After Lauren left, Cynthia returned to her desk, but she couldn't focus on the Birmingham expansion. Her mind was back in that conference room 5 years ago, facing Trevor and Patricia, terrified, but finally fighting back. She picked up her phone and called Candace. "I just sent you a referral, a young woman named Lauren Mitchell, partnership theft situation." "I'll reach out today," Candace promised. "How's she doing?" "Scared, determined, exactly like I was." "Then she's going to be fine, especially with you mentoring her through it. Candace paused. You know what this means, right? You're not just recovering from what happened to you anymore. You're transforming it into something that helps others. That's the real victory. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like responsibility. Same thing, different perspective. The question is, can you carry it? Cynthia looked around her office, at the plaques from grateful clients, at the photos of her team, at the framed copy of her partnership agreement with her new strategic partners. Airtight, reviewed by 3 different attorneys, negotiated with complete transparency. Yeah, she said softly, I can carry it. 10 years after Trevor Whitfield tried to erase Cynthia Brown from her own company, Brown Strategic had become a case study in several business schools about ethical entrepreneurship and partnership protection. Trevor himself had faded into obscurity, working in middle management at a corporate marketing firm in Atlanta, his entrepreneurial ambitions permanently derailed by his destroyed reputation. His marriage to Ashley had ended in divorce after 3 years. His father had never fully restored the family relationship, disgusted by the evidence of fraud that had come out during the settlement negotiations. Patricia Morrison had been disbarred after the Florida bar's investigation revealed a pattern of helping male partners steal from female co-founders. She'd moved to North Carolina and was working as a legal consultant, a job that required no law license and commanded a fraction of her former fees. But this story isn't about their downfall. Karma did its work without Cynthia lifting a finger. This story is about what she built in the space their betrayal created. By year 10, Brown Strategic had expanded to 4 cities: Jacksonville, Birmingham, Charlotte, and Nashville. Her team had grown to 47 employees, every single one holding some equity in the company. Her annual revenue exceeded $15 million. Her client retention rate remained above 90%, industry-leading by any standard. But numbers weren't the real measure of her success. The real measure was women like Lauren Mitchell, who'd successfully fought off her partner's theft attempt with Candace's help and had now launched her own firm. Or David Chen, a young entrepreneur from Tampa who'd read Cynthia's book and successfully negotiated an ethical partnership agreement that protected everyone involved. Or the dozens of business owners who emailed her monthly saying, "Your story saved my company. Thank you for being brave enough to share it." On the 10th anniversary of reclaiming her company, Cynthia organized a small gathering at Brown Strategic's Jacksonville headquarters. Current team members, former clients, friends, family, everyone who'd been part of the rebuilding. Candace flew in from New York. Her parents came. Even Richard Pemberton attended, still serving on Brown Strategic's board and still apologizing occasionally for not seeing Trevor's theft earlier. "Speech!" someone called out when dinner ended. Cynthia stood reluctantly. Public speaking had gotten easier over the years, but addressing people she actually cared about was harder than addressing conference audiences. 10 years ago today, she began, I sat in a conference room and signed documents that gave Trevor Whitfield complete control of the company I'd built. I thought my business life was over. I thought I'd lost everything. She paused, looking around at the faces watching her. I was wrong. I hadn't lost everything. I'd lost a corrupt partnership with someone who never valued me. Which isn't loss. It's liberation. She smiled. Trevor thought erasing my name from the company would erase my value. Instead, it forced me to rediscover exactly how valuable I actually was. Not as his partner, not as someone's employee, but as Cynthia Brown, an independent entrepreneur with strategic vision and ethical standards. Candace raised her glass. Damn right, Cynthia continued. What I want to say tonight is thank you to Candace for showing me what fighting back looks like, to Richard and the board members for remembering that integrity matters more than convenience, to my parents for eventually supporting me even when it was hard, to my team for building something worth building, and to everyone here who believed that good work and honest relationships could create something sustainable and profitable. She lifted her glass. Brown Strategic isn't just a company. It's proof that you can rebuild after betrayal. You can thrive after theft. You can turn your worst professional moment into your greatest professional strength. So here's to 10 years of strategy with integrity, and to the next 10 years, and the 10 after that. The room erupted in applause. Later, when most guests had left, Candace and Cynthia sat alone in the conference room, looking out at the river they'd both grown up beside. "Do you ever think about Trevor?" Candace asked. "Sometimes. Usually when someone tells me they're going through what I went through." Cynthia considered the question. "I don't hate him anymore. I don't wish him well, but I don't waste energy on hatred either. He's just a chapter in my story. An important chapter, but closed." "That's healthy. That's therapy," Cynthia corrected with a smile. "Lots and lots of therapy." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "You know what the best revenge is?" Candace finally said. "Living well?" "No. Teaching other women how to avoid what happened to you. Every Lauren Mitchell who walks out of your office with tools to protect herself. That's you multiplying your victory. That's Trevor's betrayal, backfiring in ways he'll never understand." Cynthia thought about that, about the emails she got weekly from entrepreneurs who'd read her story and implemented her protections, about the partnership agreements that now include her suggested clauses, about the young women who started their businesses with eyes wide open instead of naively trusting. "Yeah," she said softly. "Yeah, I think you're right." Her phone buzzed with an email. Another entrepreneur reaching out for advice, another story of potential partnership theft, another person who needed to know they weren't alone. Cynthia opened her laptop, preparing to respond. This was her life now, building her own company while helping others protect theirs. It wasn't the life she'd imagined 10 years ago. It was better, because the woman Trevor tried to erase had become the woman who taught others they couldn't be erased. And that, she reflected as she typed her response to yet another entrepreneur in crisis, was the real happy ending. Not revenge, not even justice, though there'd been some of that. The real ending was a transformation of pain into purpose, betrayal into wisdom, loss into legacy. Cynthia Brown had survived her entrepreneurial nightmare, but more importantly, she'd built something from the ashes that would help others survive theirs. And Trevor Whitfield, wherever he was in his diminished life, would spend the rest of his career being the cautionary tale in her success story. That felt like exactly the right ending. 15 years after Trevor's betrayal, Cynthia received an unexpected LinkedIn message. "Ms. Brown, you don't know me, but I'm a business student at the University of Florida. We just studied your case in our entrepreneurship ethics course. I wanted to thank you for being brave enough to share what happened to you. I'm starting my first company next year with 2 partners, and because of your story, we're getting everything documented and reviewed by an attorney before we even file incorporation papers. You probably saved my future business. Thank you." Cynthia read the message twice, then forwarded it to Candace with a single line. This is why it all mattered. Candace responded immediately. "Damn straight. Also, dinner next week? I'm flying down to celebrate your Q3. Numbers. Deal. Bring wine. The good stuff." Cynthia closed her laptop and looked around her office one more time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: client meetings, strategic planning, and the endless demands of running a successful company. But tonight, she wanted to savor this moment. The moment of knowing that her greatest professional failure had become her most important professional legacy. The moment of understanding that Trevor's attempt to destroy her had accidentally created someone stronger, wiser, and more valuable than the naive entrepreneur she'd been before. She pulled out her journal, 15 years of entries now, chronicling every up and down of rebuilding. Today, a business student I'll never meet told me my story saved their future company. This is what surviving betrayal looks like. Not bitterness, not revenge, but legacy. Not healing for yourself, but creating healing for others. Trevor taught me a brutal lesson. Trust without verification is just wishful thinking. But the universe taught me something better. Survival without transformation is just existence. I didn't just survive what he did to me. I transformed it into something that matters. He tried to erase me. Instead, he immortalized me in every cautionary tale about partnership theft, in every business ethics case study, and in every entrepreneur who reads my story and protects themselves. I don't thank him for it, but I accept that it happened, that I couldn't have become who I am without going through what I went through. And maybe that's the real lesson. Not that betrayal makes you stronger. It doesn't. It just hurts like hell. But that you can choose what you do with the pain. You can let it break you permanently, or you can forge something new from the broken pieces. I chose forging, and 15 years later, I'm still building. She closed the journal and stood, turning off the office lights one by one. Outside, Jacksonville's downtown sparkled with evening light, the river reflecting gold and amber from the sunset. Somewhere in this city, another entrepreneur was probably being betrayed by their partner right now. Somewhere, another woman was discovering that the person she trusted was stealing her work. But now, at least, they had a roadmap. They had Cynthia's story. They had tools and resources and the knowledge that fighting back was possible. That was enough. It had to be enough. Cynthia locked her office door and headed home, already thinking about tomorrow's strategy session, next quarter's expansion plans, and the ongoing work of building something that couldn't be stolen because it was rooted in integrity instead of ego. Trevor Whitfield had tried to teach her that business was about power and domination. She'd learned something different. Business was about value creation and ethical relationships. He'd lost. She'd won. Not because she was smarter or richer or more connected, but because she'd refused to become what he was, someone who built their success by diminishing others. And in a world that often rewarded treachery, that felt like the most important victory of all. So, family, that's Cynthia's story. From betrayal to breakdown to breakthrough, from stolen company to thriving empire, from victim to victor to mentor. But here's what I want to ask you. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted in business? Have you had your ideas stolen, your contributions erased, your partnership exploited? Maybe you're going through something similar right now, feeling that sick realization that your partner isn't actually your partner anymore. Drop your story in the comments. Share your experience. Because the only thing more powerful than one woman's story of overcoming partnership theft is a community of people supporting each other through it. And if you're just starting your business journey, take Cynthia's lesson to heart. Trust is beautiful. Documentation is essential. Do both. Before you go, please hit that subscribe button. Every subscription tells YouTube that stories like Cynthia's matter, that business ethics matter, that protecting entrepreneurs from predatory partners matters. Your subscription literally keeps these voices alive. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone in a questionable partnership, someone whose contributions are being minimized, someone who feels like they're being pushed out of their own company, share this video. It might be the wake-up call that saves their business. Thanks for being here, family. Thanks for listening. Thanks for caring about these stories that remind us that integrity still matters in business, that fighting back is possible, and that sometimes the people who try to break us actually show us exactly how strong we really are. Until next time, stay strategic, stay protected, and never ever let anyone convince you that your value depends on their validation. Take care, family, and remember, they can steal your company, but they can't steal your capability. That stays with you forever.